We're here for AI agents are coming for your API. Are you ready? And my name is Emmanuel Paraskakis. I've been in APIs for a while as an API product manager, but also building out tools for people that build APIs. And these days, I do consulting around APIs, and I also do teaching and instructing on a platform called Maven. And from time to time, we do these free lessons on a very specific topic, very kind of advanced topic that people are interested in. And this is one of them. And it's my pleasure to bring in and introduce Zdenek Nemec, who's a founder and CTO of Superface. But Zdenek, or Z, as some of us know you, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Emmanuel. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Z, as Emmanuel said. I'm a founder and a CTO of Superface.ai. Previously, I was the APRA. I'm the author of one of the first API descriptions format many years ago called API Blueprint. Some of you might remember it. When we were done with that, I started my API consulting firm on APIs called Good API here in Europe. So work with the largest enterprises that we have here, Volkswagen Group, DHL, Adidas, and whatnot, on their API strategy. But for almost 5 years now, I'm working on Superface.ai.
All right, awesome. And can you tell us in just a couple of words, what is Superface? Like, why did you start it?
Of course. So, of course, coming from the API background, I have witnessed the integration pain in the firsthand, and one of the main motives and the reasons behind Superface was to enable AI to integrate and to connect to the capabilities that our companies are having out there. So Superface is intelligent tools platform enabling AI agents, AI solutions to integrate with unparalleled accuracy.
Awesome. Okay, so you know a lot about this topic that we're going to talk about, and the topic is going to be about the future of API traffic, which we think eventually at some point is going to supersede the regular traffic that you see today in your API, and we think it's going to become the majority. As to when exactly it becomes like 80%, I don't know, but I think it's going to be sometime in the next few years. And the problem that we're going to talk about today is that our existing APIs are, for the most part, not designed for AI and for agents and LLMs. And that's what the numbers say. We'll show you a few numbers. And then we'll talk about how to fix that, how to make the APIs ready, or maybe redesign them, maybe what to pay attention to so that your APIs are ready for agent consumption. And we'll give you a 10-point checklist that we'll go through with examples, and then you can take that checklist, use for your own APIs, and get ready in your roadmap. Finally, we'll give you a few resources that you can use, your action plan, how do you learn more, how do you contact us, and so on, and we'll leave plenty of room for Q&A. So here's the scenario for today. Let's say you are in an organization that's betting on AI, like many of our organizations, AI and agents for the future. And let's say that you are either a product manager or an engineering lead or an architect, and you or even the founder, and you are responsible for the API at your organization. So it's on you to make decisions on the API. And now the other part of the scenario is that you know that your customers are telling you there's indications there that they're experimenting with agents and that they're thinking about how they're going to consume your API through agents, through automation. Of course, you want to make sure that your API continues to be consumed and continues to grow and perhaps tap into some of this agent opportunity and agent growth. And you want your customers, of course, to be successful and not go away, go to some other API provider as they build out all these AI solutions. And of course, that means that you will need to prioritize what to do with your API, what to put on your roadmap in order to be successful. So that's our scenario for today. We're going to discuss with that. And the problem that I see is that, as I said before, we know agent traffic is coming. We know customers are starting to build agents and so on. But because our APIs were not designed with AI in mind, we have seen indications that they're not really usable. Now, you can make those APIs accessible to agents and to AI, and we all know that the way to do this these days is MCP. And also, you can think about what you do about the connection between agents and your API. Do I put in an AI gateway? Do I impose some good rate limiting? Can I deal with spiky traffic? And you can do all this, but all you're doing there is you're letting the LLM or the agent see the API. It doesn't mean that the LLM or the agent is able to use the API. So how do we make it more usable? And this is the second problem that we'll see, and I'll let Z talk to it a little bit. Uh, Agents and LLMs are not always successful in invoking our APIs. They can see them, but they can't reliably invoke them. So Z, if you can explain a little bit what this really complex graphic is about.
Well, yeah, thank you. So this might be a shocker, but this is actually a result of our benchmark, and this is not necessarily to showcase that Superface is doing something better, but this is the actual reality of running a series of tests, executing your day-to-day CRM tasks. This was, I believe, run with HubSpot, so agents trying to achieve some tasks, a set of tasks with HubSpot, and what you are looking at is the basically goal completion rate. So what is the likelihood that all the tasks will be completed at least k times out of the 10 runs? So at the best in that selected benchmark, any solution were really only reaching just a little bit over 50%. And if you would look at some other benchmarks, some other tests, you would see similar results. Salesforce did the same. And this is basically kind of point out to the problem that we know that what AI solution might be capable of, but when we really try them in reality on real world tasks, and more importantly, where we do it over the time, over and over, can it complete the task reliably 10 times, then we are getting to some really poor numbers around 30 or even less percent. So that's the reality of agentic AI, of AI solutions, unless they are basically applied on the very simple scenarios. And what we are dealing with and what we are looking at is basically the fact that interacting with third parties applications via APIs is playing a significant, the way it is done, it plays a significant role on basically these chances of AI succeeding. And just to, that big call out there in the middle, MCP doesn't solve that. MCP helps your AI solution agent and whatnot to talk to that API, but it doesn't make it successful. And we are now really talking about goal completion rate. So what is the likelihood of a task succeeding?
And I think you were telling me that it's more likely that an agent is able to scrape a website and perhaps complete tasks than it is to do it via API, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a lot of
Crazy.
projects, and I've been talking about this on various different conferences before, but we've seen a lot of projects basically resorting to one way or another of a screen scraping instead of using APIs, because maybe the APIs were not accessible or the functionality was not there for many other reasons. But one of them might be also the goal completion rate, because it might be actually easier now for AI-powered solution to get the information from the website and trying to use an API.
Wow. Okay, so let's see what people can do. Like your customers that want to access your data have basically four options. And perhaps this will change as LLMs become significantly more powerful, but this is what you can do today. We have three strategies here. So first of all, what you could do is like focus on a very narrow, very trivial task, which is not what most of us, well, no, it's not where the value is for most customers. But if it's a very, very simple task, it will, the reliability will be much, much better. The other thing that customers could do is fine tune their own LLMs for specific task domains. And that's something that they can do. It's not always certain that they will do that. They will want to spend time and resources on doing that. They can also use custom tooling, and I think Superface is one of these custom tools. And so you're working on that, and we'll try to show you a little demo there at the end. But for the most part, I think that on your part, if you're an API product manager, if you're an API provider, the thing that you can do to help them is evolve your API. Basically make it friendlier as you redesign it, make it friendlier over time for LLMs and agents. And this is what we're going to talk about today. And to optimize that interface for AI interaction, I think there's 10 things you can do. Um, we're not going to read off the slides, but we're going to walk you through each of these 10 things. So you're going to take this, if you'd like, at the end as a checklist to compare against your API and to find the gaps and then see which of these you would need to put on your roadmap to fix and evolve your API. And these are prioritized by the order we think from our experience is important. So let's just launch into the first of it. And Z, do you want to talk about this or do you want me to?
Well, we can actually both because we have some things to say. But again, we already touched this topic. Like if that functionality is not available in your API, then I might try to scrape your site or use your SaaS product through some forms of a web crawler or controlling the web browser, or I just simply walk away to somebody else who has
Let
that.
me actually show the page.
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to show the page that's on the slide. So this is the LinkedIn API, and as you can see, it's not very friendly to look at. They talk about the restrictions. They talk about that you have to be approved by LinkedIn, and it's subject to data restrictions and agreements. And in fact, people that created applications with the LinkedIn API to help others uh, they have found that their users get banned by LinkedIn because they somehow think it violates the terms and conditions. So, even if the API is there, it doesn't offer everything in LinkedIn, and it's also very, very restricted. And I think the good example here is, in my opinion, the GitHub API, where they have basically everything on the platform, no real restrictions. I'm sure there's terms and conditions, but people don't have to worry about it. All the functionality is there. It's well documented, and you can basically come in off the street, so to speak, and start
Yeah.
creating and start invoking the API. I'm able to use it for even for demos in sessions like we do here. It's very, very easy to get started. So
You can get the access, right?
yeah,
And the function is there. Another example would be CRM systems we were integrating for our customers. We basically, few weeks in, we figure out that something doesn't work because they don't have that functionality in their API, or typical problem, right? It's available in the UI, but it's not available through API.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And it could be strategic to a company that they say, for example, for LinkedIn, to say, oh no, we want to keep here people in our UI and not let them out in other applications. But since screen scraping is available, that argument kind of goes out the window because it can be done anyway with other
But why
things.
we have it, yeah. Why we have it here is that you need to understand that screen scraping just got way easier than it was like 4 or 5 years ago. Like these agents can run around and do shopping on the web or do complex tasks. So it's now a very potential and very viable option if you sleep on your API.
Yeah. So first point, make sure you do have an API, make sure it covers all the functionality and make sure it's available and not have crazy restrictions. So go ahead
Yeah.
with the second one.
Now, at this point, we could actually have a talk just on the documentation. But documentation, or precisely a description of what is going on in your API, is one single most important way how you can control the success rate of AI solutions that are using your API. Most importantly, the documentation, the description of your API endpoints is used by AI to even pick that API endpoint in the first place. So you need to understand that by the way how you describe your API endpoints is essentially for AI to understand, oh, I should use this and that endpoint for these and those tasks, right? then of course it's necessary for AI to understand how to use it, right? How to actually work with your API, and then maybe also hinting what other endpoints to call. Now we'll be showing more actual APIs examples. This is by no means saying that those are wrong or bad APIs, but we are going to use them throughout this session just to illustrate some of the problems. So here, for example, I have a very simple task to create a new contact within Salesforce. Now, if this endpoint to basically create a contact would have the description that all the custom fields are described in this and that endpoint, in this example, contact/describe endpoint, and that the AI should obtain those first, then that would help the succeed rate, the goal completion rate of that AI solution. So here, if you don't say that in the description, if you don't say that in your API documentation, then AI needs to figure out what to put in this type C field, right? And it might try guess correctly that Dave Grohl is indeed a drummer, but that's probably not what is the enum of types on your customer object in a Salesforce. So here you are hinting that AI should be first calling some other endpoint to retrieve the possible values for this field.
And I see the same thing happen with the Jira API, and also by Atlassian, the Trello API. There's a lot of things that are kind of implied, but not explicitly and well documented. And of course, AI might eventually figure it out, but that's where you get the lower reliability, right? Okay, let's move on to item number 3.
All right, another very, very important thing to understand, and that's we didn't want to go into much detail how AI works with APIs, but one thing you probably already understand is this concept of context size. So that's really how much data, how much text can an LLM model take into account at one single time. Now, different models are having different context sizes. This is important to understand. Now they are getting bigger and bigger. Just recently announced models are reaching almost 1 million. Google Gemini has the largest context window, so how much data it can take in, and that is 2 million. Now to illustrate this, that GitHub Open API specification file is 1.7 million tokens. So it won't fit in most of these models. Translated, these models won't be able to figure out working with that big open API specification alone. Not even talking about other models that are just looking at a couple thousands or hundreds of thousands tokens. The implication of having more tokens, of course, is at the cost. So the more tokens you fit in the large language model, of course, the more costly it gets. And it also slows down the runtime. So you need to consider, when we are talking about description, how much description you put there. You are saying, oh, document everything, describe everything. But if you overdo it, then it will be slower and it will cost more money for basically agent users of your API. Now, one example I want to illustrate this on is Google Mail API. We were building a project, an agent working with emails, and it was running out of the context windows really quick. Those were a little bit smaller context windows, but nevertheless, it was like running out of the basically room for the data. Until we have figured out that it is because when we are retrieving the emails, we are also fetching base 64 encoded attachments. And obviously that's a lot of tokens, that's a lot of money, that's a lot of time, that's basically prohibiting that solution to work. And of course, those attachments were not needed in that particular use case. So in this case, the suggestion was really limit what you are sending back. Return only strictly necessary things in your API responses, and this is also one of the best use cases for a GraphQL, because as you might know, in GraphQL you can very easily express what you want to get back from an API.
So perhaps what could I do there as a product manager? I could consider, GraphQL to let people restrict what's, be very narrow about restricting what's coming back according to the use case. But if I'm also doing real product management, I might be able to understand the use cases that are out there and perhaps even design custom specific APIs for the use cases, right? So maybe create an endpoint that's special for Gmail, for this use case that you have in mind, that does not include the attachments. So even if I'm not doing GraphQL,
Yeah,
maybe I can deal with that, or I can
absolutely.
bundle API calls together, right?
Or you can put filters as a query parameter, a
Right.
filter that's filtering out the
Absolutely.
fields that the agent really wants. So that's also another way to go
Mm.
around this. But just be mindful of what you are returning and try to basically give user control, but minimize the data
Yeah.
that you are returning.
Very cool. Okay. So I think this one is related to the previous one,
It is.
right?
They are all like intertwined together. This is very related, but this is another super important thing. Not necessarily hitting the context size, but basically the reasoning capabilities of large language models in year 25, and that is the number of tools that you are giving
Mhm.
to a model, to AI solution, should be limited. Translated, it means that if you throw 200 endpoints at an AI solution, then it won't simply work. It will be overwhelmed with all the possibilities. So we really think after 3 years building agents that the sweet spot is around only 10 tools, aka endpoints. So we are saying give only few endpoints to every AI solution, and that can be, of course, controlled by the users. But where they don't have a control over it is when your API is very complex. And for example, here in Oracle Hospitality, to do a check-in into a hotel, it's a very complex business process, but it's at minimum 11 calls. This will be very difficult. This will have a very low chances on succeeding over the time with an AI, because it's a lot of endpoints that needs to be called in a particular order. So you want to limit this. You maybe want to do one endpoint for chicken. Of course, that will be a lot of parameters. That's another problem we'll talk about. But
Mm.
these are the problems that we are looking at. So limit the number of tools, aka endpoints, that are necessary to achieve something with your API.
Got it. Makes sense. All right. So this next one is super, super interesting, I think. And we see this a lot in a lot of APIs.
Yeah, abstraction. It's a problem for human engineers as well. So when you are very abstract, when you are like normalizing your APIs, when you have some interlinked data structures and whatnot, you can go really crazy and start making your APIs very abstract. And abstract APIs are a big problem for LLMs. One example to show here. Let's say we have a simple Kanban board in Notion, where you have some columns and some cards, and you are just moving them between the statuses. So that would be very straightforward for AI to pick up. But the way Notion implemented this in their API is basically they have this concept of database. So everything on a page is a database, and you need to iterate through the blocks in the database, and you need to fetch these blocks. And it's very difficult for AI to pick this up and understand this abstract structure. So avoid abstraction
Mm.
when possible.
Yeah. So when you see any API that has, object and then kind of object type, and then you have to manipulate these objects, I think that's when it's time to make them more concrete. Or I think you were describing an example to me of was it the Google Sheets
Google
API or
Sheets,
some
also,
other?
yeah, we have it actually on the next slide, I believe.
Okay, let's go look at that. I remember you talking about that. Oh yeah, yep.
Somehow we dropped the image, but that's all right.
Mm.
So that's basically a special case of the abstraction and complexity. In the case of here it is. So in the case of Google Sheets, this is about the nesting. So what I
Mm.
want to say here is deeply nested objects are also a problem. Like flat parameter structure is the best way to go, Once you have like 2, 3, 4, 5 and more levels of nesting, that will be more likely for AI to make a mistake and basically won't work reliably. Now with Google Sheets, you can of course manipulate the cells and you can change the ranges and you can do all sorts of crazy stuff, but it's much more reliable if you just offer a function like add a row, add a column, then just modify an arbitrary range and arbitrary position, basically. So, making it a little bit simpler for AI is the best way to go here.
And again, this goes back to, again, I have to say it, product management, where it's not just a use case, it's just a job to be done. Add a row is, what the user intends to happen, whether the user is an agent or not, what needs to happen. So, be explicit about it, add a row, and not abstract or complex with this nesting. All right, so this one is kind of, I want to talk to this because it's very near and dear to me. And it's basically sticking to standards and conventions. Remember, the LLMs are trained on all the stuff that we know, which means including the standards that we know and the conventions we know. So kind of the don't surprise the LLM concept there. And if your API is following accepted practices, even normal standards, and things that people would expect in an API, that's great. If you're deviating from those, you're going to introduce complexity and confusion. So I have this example here that I wanted to show from an application called HeyGen. It's an application that produces avatar videos. You put in the text that you want the avatars to speak, and it produces a lifelike person in a video speaking what you asked. And you can change the character, you can change the person, their characteristics, how they speak, their language, and so on. It's a great API, great application, great AI use case. However, for such a new API, and they're already in their version 2, as you can see here, I think they've made a few deviations from convention. So first of all, this is a post API where we're creating something, we're generating this video, and they return a 200 when everything is okay. Well, the convention is to return a 201 for created. So you're already kind of moving away from the normal and from the conventions. And in this case, because it's a long running video generation, it might take like 8 seconds for this video to be generated. It should be actually a 202, not even a 201. So they're completely deviating. And then they've got this little error thing in their response, which is kind of duplicative of the status code. So that would be confusing. And they also have this data envelope. Why do they need it there? I don't think they need it there. And there's more here. So for example, the header for the API key, they could use a authorization header, which is more standard rather than X API key. Maybe use better naming for the resource. Use a link instead of just the ID for the video ID. And you can't see it here, but they also, I don't think they have any rate limiting when you send in a video generation. So that could be a problem. So all of it together, it's kind of putting it in a territory where it's deviating from standards and conventions and kind of surprising every kind of user, human or LLM. So that could be an improvement that they need to make their stick to this.
Why you need to think about the standards, and it's probably best to respect them, is because these models are trained on, let's say, HTTP conventions, right? So they do understand that, what the status codes are and how the HTTP is being used properly, or certain authentication schemes. So if you start coming with your own authentication schemes, that's probably the worst thing you can do.
Oh, yeah.
But that will definitely actually confuse the model, because it's knowledge base. It doesn't know how to work with it. So you are making it way harder for any AI solution working with your API to use it properly.
And these would be things that have been known for quite a while. And you don't use post for deleting a resource, for example. And it's all kinds of things that we see in APIs out there. So these are, I would consider them a kind of low-hanging fruit. Go fix them because they're good for anybody, not just the AI, right? Okay, so and this next one is also one we see a lot. We see bad error messages. So, for example, you might have a 400 status code, which means the API didn't understand what the input was, what you sent in, and it might come back with an error message that says bad input. Okay, well, that's not understandable by an agent. The agent doesn't know what to do next. It's going to abandon this. However, if you try to provide more information and here's one of our recommendations: use the problem details format. If you try to do that and add more information, here, for example, it says request parameters are not valid. So, okay, so the agent knows to look at the parameters that is sent in. And then it gives more information. The age parameter, it must be a positive integer, and maybe you sent in a negative number, and now the LLM or the agent knows what to fix. And
Okay.
this is something that an LLM can very easily go back and fix. And we've seen it time over time. Feedback the error to the LLM or have the agent look at the error, and it will fix it.
Yeah, it
We've seen
knows. Sorry.
Yeah, we've seen this also with code gen tools. For example, Replit, it will look at the errors coming back from the code, and it will go and fix them. So give that information to the agent. Go ahead.
And a more realistic AI agent has this concept of React. So looking at the results of a function call, of a tool call or API call, and if there is a helpful message like, hey, this age must be a positive integer, it will try again with maybe fixing that input to fixing that age. Now, if you remember the first sorry, that was our second point. In the description, we were saying, hey, in the description, before you fill in this parameter, make sure to look at this and that endpoint to get the possible values. So if this is your second chance. If you don't do it in the description, you can put it here. You can say, hey, type has to be one of the values available from this endpoint. And this thing will pick it up and it will call that endpoint prior to trying it again with hopefully correct value. So your error responses are essential for helping AI to figure out, because it's like a developer playing with your API in a Postman or some other tool, trying to call that API, see what can be fixed and calling it again. So that's essentially what AI solutions are doing these days.
Yeah, and just to make it clear, this is the part here that is going to make the difference between success
Yeah.
or failure. The added information, the specific information about what exactly went wrong and what the agent can do to fix it. All right. Okay. Next one.
Okay, so now we are talking about the parameters. So let's continue on that. Now, onto required fields. You should communicate, even in a human documentation, any relationships between the parameters that you might have in your API endpoint. Use JSON schema, not just the words when it is possible. Use default values. This example is from a scrapin. So basically an API that allows you to access the LinkedIn. And they had this very nice endpoint enrichment, but looking at the query parameters, it's not clear that you need either to provide email or a combination of the other parameters. That's not even written in the
So
human.
you're saying there's some logic behind it that says if you pass email, that's great, but if you don't, you have to pass in some other combination.
Exactly that. You will not figure it out. If the error message is not descriptive enough, then you won't be able to recover, and you are basically left with a broken AI solution.
Mhm.
So you really need to communicate what are the relationship. Ideally, using JSON schema. If that's not possible, then at least document it in a description. One of the very good practice is basically using enums wherever possible. So basically, we are doing this to don't let AI to think of what the value should be. If that is possible, of course, last name, that could not be an enum, right? But when that is possible, use enums. Give AI the values to choose from. Don't let it to figure it out, if that is, of course, possible.
And I'm guessing that also helps with hallucinations, right? It can't come up with
Absolutely.
random values.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. And I think this next one is the last one and related.
It's very much related. So there is also a surprising problem with optional fields, and that is also going back to hallucination. And that is when you have way too many optional fields. For example, Google Maps API, this one was, I think, over 18 optional fields. That might not be a problem. So this all adds together with what we were discussing so far. But that might not be a problem if you expose only this API as a tool to your agent, because there is not much, possibilities for it to think about something else. But if you put more tools, remember I was saying, hey, look at the 10 tools at the maximum, or even more, then you can really quickly overwhelm the LLM model, and it will start hallucinating. It will start coming with optional parameters that maybe you don't want to be there, and it might be taking or drawing away the attention from the important things. So be very conservative also with the optional parameters. And again, don't give AI a chance to think too much, right? That's basically the message here.
And just to be clear here, these are the optional parameters on the request body, like when you're
Yeah, I think
sending
it's the
information.
query parameters here in the URL,
I see.
like query parameters on this endpoint.
I see.
But that doesn't really matter. It goes back to again, be really like concise but narrow and limit what you are returning and what you are getting into your API, because everything is a token. Everything costs money. Every token, every parameter is a possibility for AI to hallucinate a value, right? So you want to minimize basically the surface that is being exposed to an AI agent.
So I guess kind of the takeaways here are, describe and simplify. So if we were to analyze this, what do you do? First of all, do design your API with agents and LLMs in mind, and do try it out and see, I put an MCP server there. Can I use Claude and see if it understands my API? So go try it out. Use the tools that exist out there to try it out. Use the checklist that we gave you. We'll send out the recording and the slides by email, and use the checklist from the top. So start with the first point that we had there. Actually, have an available API that can be used by people, that's accessible. Start with that and prioritize these on your roadmap, let's say the next 12 months. And make sure the API is accessible. So use well-known authentication. I think OIDC and OAuth here is a must. Have an easy self-serve sign up and easy to understand billing and instant onboarding. Don't be in a place where it's like, oh, well, we have to send you a DocuSign in order to get access to our API. And above all, I think do use good API product management practices, which means think about the user. In this case, it's the agent. Try to figure out the use cases. Try to build products or APIs that are specific to the use cases, and try to anticipate their needs, and monitor and look at the numbers and your analytics, and understand what the usage is like. Z, anything to add here before we conclude and go to
No,
Q&A?
this is perfect. Try to use your API from an AI agent, or from a custom GPT, or from a Claude, whatever that is. Just try, go ahead and try to use your API. Now it's easier than ever. You don't even have to have an open API specification. So that's also something what we at Superface might help you with. You just punch in basically domain, and it will figure out how to make it accessible to AI.
Okay, let's see if we have a few minutes to actually show that. But if not, let me just tell you where to go from here. So first of all, connect with us on LinkedIn, both of us, and just ask us questions. Happy to chat about this. I'd say look at the Superface blog. Z is writing there. Lots of good information. It goes deeper than what we talked about here today. Do try to use Superface AI, like Z mentioned here, to test your API with AI. And there is, if you don't have time for the demo, there is a video that shows exactly
I'll
how to
put it
do
in
that.
the chat here that shows
Yeah,
how
throw it
to.
in the chat. That's perfect. And so that's a video to show you how to get started, where you are telling what API you need, and Superface tries to figure that out and tries to integrate the API with the LLM. And of course, I teach API product management courses. It'll tell you more about how to design APIs, how to think about API design, how to do API product management that we talked about here. My next free session is in a week, and kind of taking all the knowledge that we have here, it's going to talk about the actual connection, the pipes between the APIs and the LLMs. We're going to talk about MCP. So please sign up for that, and we'll see you here in the next week. But also, if you're interested in going deeper, I do have a course called API Product Mastery for experienced PMs, and we talk about all sorts of things like governance, API lifecycle, API standards, design, also the agents and MCP, and produce API prototypes with AI. And then we talk about the go-to-market, developer experience, and so on. Now, there is a code on the screen here for the first 10 signups. Code is agents. If you use that or scan the QR, you'll get a good discount. I expect that to go very, very quickly. But if you're on the recording, use code Superface for $150 off. And these courses are very highly rated by folks. I think with that, Z, we should go to Q&A. And I see a lot of Q&A, a lot of questions in the chat. So maybe if you see one that you'd like to take, or I can go back to the start and look at them and pick them off one by one.
I went through a chat. Kevin took a great
Thanks,
did a great
Kevin.
work answering some of those. Yes. As for there was a question on a screen scraper tool. In person, I like a browseruse.com for in-agent use of basically scraping capability. So definitely check that one out.
Okay, and could you toss those links in the chat?
Yes, I put it in the answer there. I'll just throw it there again.
Thank you.
Great. There's a question on the slides. You answer that.
Yep, we'll send the slides by email. Let me try to go back. Sorry about this. Just scrolling through the chat here. So Arazo, that was a good observation there. So what is Arazo, and why do we hear so much about it? Like OpenAPI, Arazo is a spec that basically aggregates or specifies workflows out of many API calls. And yes, I think it's going to be something that's going to be very interesting in terms of specifying to LLMs what to do. It's a fairly new spec, so I think it has to get a little bit more usage, a little bit more understanding from within LLMs. I don't know if anybody's seen an LLM that understands Arazo yet, but it should come. It should be there, and you can create a complete workflow and describe it with Arazo. Z, have you used that?
No, not really. Sorry, I was answering already another question.
Okay. All right.
But then just on the Arazo, the problem is you would need to put a lot of tools, aka points to LLM, and that would still not solve the problem of what we were discussing, like don't give LLM too many tools, right?
But it does give the unambiguous instructions of how to.
It does, but even if you again, there is a hard limit on GPT or 30 tools, right? So, I mean, it's nice that it gives the instruction. That's definitely helpful, but you might still be hitting the limits of a number of the tools that are servable, basically.
This was a question for you, Z. So Tom from Wiremark is saying, hey, what about hypermedia? What about Hatios? Wouldn't that API design be really, really helpful? Because on the surface, it seems like, oh my God, this is exactly what we need. We need the hypermedia links that tell an LLM what's available.
That's why it works so well with websites, right? HTML, as long as they are not some crazy single page applications. But even then, yeah, absolutely.
Because the web is basically one big hypermedia API, right? And exactly that's why it works so well. So Dave is saying, well, if the API has an open API description, can you use that to prevent the 400 errors by conforming to the types and the JSON schema constraints? So the LLM is looking at open API and it's unambiguous about what is allowed in the input parameters. Therefore, does that minimize the 400 errors? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but
I think the question is, does OpenAPI help help as documentation, as description?
it again, it's the way how you write it. It might. So it might help there, yes.
And I think my tendency would be to say yes, because you're actually clearly enumerating what the input parameters are, what their types are, what their ranges are, and hopefully you're also including some examples and descriptions that are going to help the LLM. All right. Let's see. Chris saying, seems you need to understand that the agents want and give them simple but powerful tools. Yes, absolutely. And the agents will prefer your APIs and even recommend your APIs. Is that a realistic possibility? I think the agents will prefer the APIs that comply with this 10-point checklist. For sure that's true. And what happens if you don't? Well, the agent is either going to go scrape your website, or even worse, it's going to go use some competitors' API, which you probably want to avoid. And a point I wanted to make about scraping, people say, hey, it's fine, then it'll scrape my website, it gets the job done. I think that's good, but I think people want to have a little bit more control and understanding and use their analytics and be basically in control of what data is available, and that's what APIs are all about. Okay, you suggested the scrapers. We'll send the slides by email. And Rahul says, banking and financial grade APIs. Instant onboarding is difficult. Is it still feasible to expose APIs to agents? So Rahul, I think my answer to that, and I'm curious to what Z's answer is. My answer to that is access is one thing. Having all the information available with a dummy key is another thing. So you could get things done. You could have all your documentation. You could have the ability to give access to even a sandbox environment and get things done by an agent. And I understand that there are prerequisites that should happen for financial API. So Z, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So the way we solve the complexity is basically hide it and make this what we call specialist agent. So Superface is reaching, better or getting to a better performance through specialist agent. So meaning that you might, if you have a complex problem, let's say my check-in to a hotel example, so you make an agent that encapsulates only that problematic. It controls those 10, 11 endpoints, and that's about it. And that's your check-in specialist. So an agent, like in a multi-agent infrastructure that is used by other agents, to do a check-in. So you basically hide that and encapsulate that complexity into one agent that knows how to do check-in, maybe knows how to do a payment or whatever that is in the financial world, and that knows only that thing, and it is like the limited set of operators.
So would banks and fintechs get into the process of having to approve, let's say, have approved agents that are cleared to access their APIs, do you think?
We'll see. That's definitely a possibility.
Yeah. Okay, so there's one last question from Tim, and I think we can show a very quick demo, Z, to answer that question. So Tim, my friend Tim McGuire is saying, awesome product manager, by the way. He's saying, do you have any suggestions when we run into issues using an API through LLM and it's not designed properly? So other than to look for an alternative API, or other than to, hey, take 6 months to redesign your API and wait until then. Can we show very briefly what Superface can do with an existing API?
Yes, it's just a disclaimer. It's Superface is one of the ways. So the answers are on the slide 7. Those 4 options. I don't know if you want to flip all the way back. It's where I start.
As we speak.
So basically, when it doesn't work and you really want to use that API, you have the 3 other options, or the first 3 options that we were actually.
Here.
Yeah, here. So of course, like number 1 is not the option. You want to do it. You cannot narrow down the scope, right? Mm-hmm. So you are stuck with either custom training, so you can fine tune your models on the underlying models, like on examples. Hey, this is good example. This is bad example. Training your model on figuring out how to use an API that is in not so good shape, or do it in the tooling. So there is this concept of tools. That are basically at the end of the day encapsulating API calls, and you can do a lot of logic and a lot of smartness in the tools. And as I already mentioned, these tools could be other agents, right? So that's what we are doing at Superface. So you can have a tool that is an agent that knows how to do it, but you can have a tool that maybe knows how to chain 6 API calls, or how to extract something that LLM cannot figure out. So you basically in this situation, you would need to go down to the tool level and basically program the tool to do what you wanted to do with that pool.
You want to show us Superface in 3 minutes just to wrap it up?
Here well, I'm sure, of course, yes.
Okay. Let me stop sharing. All right, go ahead.
So, all right,
we'll keep it really short, and
I'll keep it.
We'll wrap it up after this. But any other questions that you have, throw them in the chat, please.
Yeah, or join or ping us on LinkedIn. So what you are seeing here is a very maybe complex interface, but it's doing one thing and one thing only. So you type in your basically application domain. So I'll just go with weather.in. You don't have to point to API documentation. You don't have to have an open API specification. So what this thing is doing, and I have already created this one. So basically, you punch in your top-level domain. And
so what is weather.in?
Yeah, I just use weather.in, but it could be.
What is it?
I think it's a weather service.
Okay.
So it might have some API documentation somewhere. So what is happening right now? This thing is going on the web. It's looking at the weather in. You can actually use some actual use cases like fetch weather, or add a new deal in Pipedrive or whatever that is. But you can be as sparse as just saying, hey, this is my URL. And this is using web browser, right? This is screen scraping that website to find API documentation. So it's going there, it's figuring it out. Now it figured out that, again, I just put their weather in. There is indeed an API, and these are things that you might be doing with the API. I just confirm that. And basically, this thing will keep going on and start looking at the API documentation. Again, it doesn't have to be open API specification. It can be just any HTML page on your website. And once this will be done with its things, It will be available here on the right side. And I'll just cut through this because this will take probably a few more minutes. And then you can use your GPT or Claude, doesn't matter. Here are the instructions, like how to connect to GPT or to connect to Claude, and basically play with your API from either your custom GPT or a Claude for desktop application.
So just to be clear, if you're an API provider, this is going to be your user employing
your user, yeah,
and basically coming across something that they want to use in your website, in your API, and saying, hey, here's the URL, just go tell me what I can do to use it. And you as an API provider can follow our checklist that we had to be a little friendlier to one of these tools so that it's easier and your users can use it much easier with one of these tools.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And the best thing is, you as a user, you don't need to know about that, anything about an API. So the video I linked earlier in the chat here is basically showing this. I have a Claude application. There is a Superface MCP server running in it. I ask it to add something to Todoist. It doesn't know it. I go to this tool. I say basically add a task to Todoist, and it goes to the web. It figures out what Todoist is.
Mm-hmm.
It figures out its API documentation from the web. Again, no open API spec needed. And basically it also tested it. So it's doing a couple of test calls. I can see it in my Todoist application. It's really testing the API calls, whether they are working, whether the integration is working. And it, of course, asked me for the credentials. You can watch this video at your discussion. It's linked in the chat. And basically makes that Todoist available via MCP. So back to where we started. That's just a transportation. That's just a pipe. It's making it available to my Claude application, and I can now indeed use Todoist from Claude without me ever seeing Todoist API or API documentation.
No, that's great. And remember, the more all of these points you hit on the 10-point checklist, the more successful these tools are going to be. Therefore, the more usage you are going to get, right? It's just another way, another conduit for your API to get used by either users that already know you or users that don't. So think of it as also a discovery kind of process. Okay. Any other final questions? If not, we can wrap it up here, and we can send out the recording, we can send out the slides, and we can send out links and more resources for everybody to look at. Cool. Well, Z, thank you so much for
my pleasure
joining us here and dropping all this knowledge. And I think this is amazing and very practical. And I think people should definitely go take that checklist and compare it with their API, and reach out to you on LinkedIn and connect with you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good day. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.